Hey Internet, I'm back. Okay, so let's talk about the Nintendo Switch. First of all, you all know I'm kind of a Nintendo fanboy. I've made that pretty clear with the games and consoles I've reviewed so far, and to give you a quick history, I've owned every Nintendo console since the NES, and since the 64 I've bought them all either on launch or within a week. So I've played a lot of Nintendo stuff, and that's why I kinda have to talk about this thing. And a quick disclaimer, I'm not reviewing Zelda, at least not yet. I'm reviewing the console itself. I know it's hard to talk about one without the other right now, but we're just going to press forward. So first off, this is a console that's also a handheld, which is pretty nifty. You can plug it into your TV, play it that way, and then whenever you're bored of the TV screen and want to have a much smaller screen for some apparent reason, you can. See? Games. Isn't it pretty? The issue there is that most people that would play handhelds are not the people that are buying consoles anymore. Nintendo's been banking a lot on nostalgia, milking all their old franchises and IPs, and just putting out more and more of basically the same thing. And that's great for getting crowds like me, people that grew up with video games and specifically Nintendo. The issue is, we don't do handhelds a lot anymore. I don't know about you guys, but between work and family stuff and everything else going on in my life, I don't have a lot of time to carry around video games. If I'm on the go, I'm usually busy. And when I'm at home, I don't want to stare at a 6-inch screen, I want to stare at the 65-inch screen sitting behind the camera here. But regardless of how often people actually use the handheld thing, it is kind of nifty, and I'll just move along. Next up, I will say that the hardware on this thing is just, it's not as beefy as the stuff out there right now. The Xbox One and the PS4 both have much better specs than this thing does. Which is understandable, they're trying to fit it into a small micro tablet. The problem is, Xbox and PlayStation have already released their, well not released, but announced their next consoles, the Scorpio and the Neo. And the problem is, if this can't even keep up with current gen hardware, it's not even going to hold a candle to the new stuff. And the issue here is going to be one of the same issues Nintendo's run into since the Wii, where they stopped being competitive as far as hardware. It's really hard to find third-party developers that are going to make a game on those two consoles and then strip it down and port it backward to inferior hardware just to do a partnership with Nintendo. Chances are they're going to say, your hardware's not up to spec, we can't do it, and Nintendo's just going to miss out on those games. It's what we all saw with the Wii, the Wii U, I mean, everything. And unfortunately, it's what killed the last console, so we'll see if Nintendo can pull something out of the bag for this one. And speaking of games, the launch lineup on this thing kinda sucks. Granted, we have Zelda, which is, you know, it's a console buyer. You will buy this console to play that. Which is ridiculous because it is also on the Wii U, but hey, I was one of the many that did go and buy it anyway, so it works. There's also a Bomberman game, which would be this here. It's not that it's a bad game, it's just definitely not worth the full price tag that was on this thing. And then there was 1-2 Switch, which is a small collection of mini games basically made to introduce you to this console and how to use the controllers. That should have been free and packaged with the console, to be perfectly honest. No one should pay any money for that. It's ridiculous that Nintendo thought that was a full title and didn't include it with the console. And honestly, that's about it. Like I said, launch lineup for this kinda sucks. And granted, they have a lot of great stuff coming in the pipeline. Binding of Isaac is coming out next week with the DLC and the expanded version. At some point we're getting Shovel Knight again with the DLC and expansions and all of that. There's a Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the way. I know they're working on a Fire Emblem Warriors thing, similar to like Hyrule Warriors or Dragon Quest Heroes, all that stuff. Speaking of, they are doing Dragon Quest Heroes 1 and 2 is going to be released on here. So there's good stuff on the way. Hell, we might even get a sequel to Hyrule Warriors or maybe Pokken Tournament that will have all the extra characters that the arcade got. So later on this will be great, but for right now, the gaming on this, very, very limited. You can play Zelda, and that's about it. But let me get to a positive. One good thing the console did is they moved back to cartridges. Nintendo had cartridges way longer than any other console maker, and honestly, it's the way to go at this point. Flash memory has been expanded so much that these cartridges are, not infinitely, but very, very largely bigger than any kind of disc technology you're going to get out there right now. Blu-rays, even if they're double layer, I think can only get roughly 15 gigs. Maybe that's incorrect, don't quote me, I don't really care. The point is, these things, SanDisk last year released a 1 terabyte micro SD card. So if you can fit a terabyte on something the size of my fingernail, cartridges are going to be the way to go. Plus you're going to get faster load times, a little bit better performance, and what's really cool is you can read and write to a cartridge, which means your save games, your DLC, your patches and updates, everything can be installed onto the cart instead of on the console itself. I have to go back to the negative side of things now, though, and say that even though all of what I said is true, Nintendo decided not to do that. They instead put the save games and all the other downloads on the console itself. And then, as another, kick to the face, they decided to give this thing a 30 gigabyte hard drive. That is ridiculous and just an insult. Like I said, SanDisk released a 1 terabyte micro SD card. Those things are minuscule and basically inconsequential as far as space goes, and yet for some reason Nintendo couldn't find a way to fit more than 30 gigs into this. It's basically planned obsolescence. They're forcing you to either buy a new version that'll come out later on with an actual hard drive in it, or to buy the micro SD cards that you can plug into this. And buyer beware, if you get the Nintendo branded micro SD cards, they cost a lot more than just a regular non-Nintendo branded one. Same thing, same technology, they're made by the same companies. One has Nintendo's logo on it, the other doesn't. So don't buy the Nintendo one, is what I'm saying. But yeah, the hard drive on this is ridiculous. In fact, if you buy digital at all, Breath of the Wild will take up half your hard drive on its own. And when Dragon Quest Heroes, Warriors, whatever the hell it's called, 1 and 2 comes out, that actually is a bigger install file than this hard drive can handle. So, in a month or two, when we get that game, already your hard drive is useless unless you bought the physical copy. Granted, as you may have noticed, I'm a bit of a collector. I do physical copies of everything. This won't affect me as much, but for everyone out there that likes digital and likes the ease of use, especially with a portable console where you can digitally load up your whole library and take it on the go, this is just bullshit, Nintendo. And speaking of bullshit things that Nintendo did, and I said I wasn't going to swear in my new videos. I didn't say it to you, I said it to myself, but apparently that's already a lie, so my bad. Is that Nintendo is forcing you to buy extras. Like I said with the bigger hard drive or micro SD thing, they're making you spend more money even after you've already bought this thing. And no, I don't mean the Pro Controller, which is $70 by the way, a ridiculous price for a controller. I mean that when you're using the Switch as a home console, you have it plugged into the stand on your TV, you have these little Joy-Con dealers in the holster, there's no way to charge them while using them. For like the Xbox One here, you just plug the cord into the back, plug it into your console, and as you're playing, this is also charging via USB. PS4 does the same thing. The Switch does not. The only way to charge these Joy-Cons is to have them on this tablet and in the holster charging. So you cannot play this and charge it at the same time. There's no way to do it, it is impossible. At least until a third party, or Nintendo, creates one of those little controller holder thingers and gives it a USB port, which means you have to buy something else. It's kind of bullshit that Nintendo would do this. It's a huge oversight unless it was done on purpose. Either way, that's kind of crap. And it's just another annoyance to be aware of. And it is an annoyance because the battery life on this thing is honestly not great. Especially with something that's a little more taxing on the console like Zelda. Your battery life is only going to be 3, maybe 4 hours. On something not as difficult like Bomberman here, you might get up to 6. But that's probably the end of the battery life. 6, I think, is about the best you can expect of this. And that's ridiculous. The 3DS goes much longer than that. So does the Vita. Even my MacBook gets longer than that. It's just ridiculous that at this point, they still haven't done anything about battery life. I know that can be improved, and they're just not. And it's really disappointing. And one last negative note, and I know there's a lot of those, but what are you going to do? Is that this console is actually sold out. This should be no surprise to any of you who have followed Nintendo in the last, 5 to 10 years. But it's a new trend they seem to be doing, which is utterly stupid. is that they make something people want, and then they release none of them, so no one can get them. I'm going to give you a moment to take that in, and even after you've pondered it, it still won't make sense, and that's my point. It doesn't. They did the same with the NES Classic, or Mini, or whatever the hell that thing's called. The same issue was with the Wii U, the Wii, with all their amiibo figures, with both the special and the Master Edition of the Zelda games for this console. They always release limited numbers of things, and I don't really know why. You sometimes hear them make the claim that, you know, if things are limited, it drives up the demand and this and that, but you know what? People wanted to buy it, regardless of how many you made, so just make enough for them to buy it. I really don't see any sense in that. If the money's there, the customers are there, they're waiting to get the thing. Make enough. Make more than enough. Make extra. Sell them all. You know, they only sold 15 million Wii U's. Maybe it's because they didn't make any. You know, when people were looking for them and couldn't find them, they gave up. They bought a PS4. They bought an Xbox One, because why the hell not? You can find those. And like I said, with the special and the Master Edition of Zelda, you couldn't get them. They made one very small shipment, and that was it. And then Reggie from Nintendo even came out and said, well, when they're gone, they're gone. And I know there are some people out there defending it, saying that, you know, because it's a special edition, it has to be limited. If it's not limited, it's not really special, and people don't want to buy it. Well, I'm going to go ahead and call bullshit on that, because as you can see from all this here and everything on the shelves behind me, I've bought plenty of special editions. I always want to buy them. And you know what? Not one of these was hard to find, even after they were released. Any of these, I could go out, pick the edition I wanted, and get it. Because these companies know that people want to buy these and are willing to spend the extra money, so they make enough for people to get. And of course, you have to release regular editions, because there are some casual players that don't care about all the bonuses, the extras, the figurines, and soundtracks and whatnot. They just want the game. That's fine, but for the players that want these things, you gotta make them. That's where the money is. So, after all that, the main question is this something worth buying? And honestly, right now, the answer has to be no. That's not to say it won't be great later on. You know, when they release some patches and some updates to maybe improve the battery life, fix the connectivity of these Joy-Cons, which are constantly dropping or lagging, obviously release more games for it, maybe improve the hard drive, or, you know, they have to make some changes, they have to do some things, they have to expand the library, but when all that is done, this will probably be a great console. Already, I've actually been having a lot of fun with it, and honestly, despite all the negatives I said, I have to endorse it. It's fun, I enjoy it. So, like I said, it's worth getting, just not right now. It's really, if you're a hardcore person, you want to have every console, I guess grab it when you can find one. But since they're sold out anyway, you probably just want to hold off. And with that, I guess, I don't know, I'm done. One last thing I'm going to mention, and this is actually not a joke. These cartridges taste terrible. Now I know you think I'm crazy, but let me explain. They're worried that kids are going to eat these. You know, little children are stupid and they put everything in their mouth and they swallow stuff. And these are admittedly tiny. So Nintendo actually made them taste really, really bad. Oh god. Yep, no, oh, wow. Okay, that was a mistake. I really should have practiced before I turned the camera on. That was gross. Ugh. Okay, yeah, don't do that. It tastes like, I don't know, if you've ever eaten like baker's chocolate, like just really bitter ass taste. No, don't do that at all.